Welcome to Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
So right now, as you're listening to this, your brain is actually burning through roughly 20% of your body's total energy.
Right. Yeah, it's a massive biological furnace, basically.
Well, exactly. And, if you're like most people, a shockingly large chunk of that energy, a really big chunk isn't even going toward your career or your family or like your passions.
Well, totally. No, it's being burned in the background.
Yeah, it's being burnt and drafting this 3-paragraph text message in your head just to explain why you don't want to go to some, mid-tier restaurant on a Tuesday night.
It's the invisible labor we all do.
Right.
We are dedicating these elite cognitive resources, right? The exact same brain power that could solve complex problems or create art.
Right.
And we're using it to manage the hypothetical disappointment of an acquaintance we see maybe twice a year.
Yeah, it's wild. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today we're looking at a psychological habit that is, it's so pervasive you've probably engaged in it 3 times before breakfast.
At least 3 times.
Yeah, right. So we are examining this incredibly sharp piece of source material. It's titled The Compulsion of Constant Justification.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission today is really to dissect the sheer physical exhaustion that comes from feeling this intense need to defend every single decision you make.
Yeah, and we're going to look really closely at the mechanics of this, too, because in this hyper-connected world where anyone can just reach us at literally any moment, we've developed this chronic confusion.
Oh, the confusion between, justifying our existence and actually knowing ourselves.
Exactly. We confuse the two constantly.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear right up front, the goal of unpacking all this isn't to make you feel guilty for, sending that long, rambling text message yesterday.
No, definitely not. We've all been there.
Right. The goal is actually to help you reclaim your cognitive bandwidth.
Absolutely. We're going to decode why this compulsion exists and why your brain treats a simple, unexplained no as some kind of mortal threat.
Yeah, it really does.
And we'll explore this brilliant concept from our sources, which is, and this is the core of it, if your choices are valid, they don't need a presentation to prove it.
I love that line. It's so true.
It's so good. We're getting into the game theory of personal limits and why we so mistakenly treat our boundaries like opening offers in a negotiation. So let's start with that biological cost we mentioned at the top.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Because this isn't just a quirky personality trait, right? The source text deliberately uses the phrase, the compulsion of constant justification. And, compulsion is a heavy word.
It is. It implies a total lack of control.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this. Why compulsion?
Well, it implies a neurological loop. When we talk about this behavior, we really have to look past the idea that it's just, being polite.
I'm just being nice.
Exactly. A compulsion is an automatic, almost involuntary reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's driven by this highly sensitive threat detection system in your brain.
So it's not a conscious choice at all?
Not really, no. When you make a decision, let's say deciding to stay in on a Friday night and you leave it unexplained, your amygdala often perceives that silence as a literal social threat.
Oh, wow. A threat.
Yeah. It registers it as a loose end that could lead to you being misunderstood or judged or, completely socially ostracized.
So physically speaking, when I decide to cancel a plan and I'm just staring at that blank text screen, the spike in my heart rate is what? My brain preparing for social exile.
Precisely. Because evolutionarily, human survival depended entirely on remaining in the good graces of the tribe.
Right, because if they kick you out, you die.
Exactly. Being misunderstood could lead to being cast out, which historically meant death. And today, that ancient hardware is still running.
But it's firing off alarm bells over oat milk lattes?
Yes. Or declining a Zune happy hour. Your brain is just trying to keep you safe by ensuring everyone around you thoroughly approves of your actions.
Man, that makes so much sense. We walk around with this subconscious framework that a decision isn't actually real or permissible until someone else signs off on our reasoning.
We really do. We need that external stamp of approval.
It's like we live our lives inside an everyday courtroom. That's the visual I keep coming back to as I was reading through these notes.
The everyday courtroom, I like that.
Yeah, we're constantly acting as our own frantic defense attorney, but the crimes we're defending are just absurdly minor.
Right, like totally trivial things.
Exactly. You're standing before a jury, sweating through your suit, giving this passionate opening statement about why you went to bed at 9:30 p.m. Like, members of the jury, if you observe the defendant's step count, you will clearly see sleep was the only recourse.
That is exactly what it feels like. And the tragic irony of the everyday courtroom is that you are playing every single role in that room.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, you are the defense attorney, yes, but you are also the one projecting the role of the harsh, skeptical judge onto the other person.
Oh, wow.
You imagine your friend slamming a gavel and yelling, "Objection! You watched 3 episodes of television last night. You were not that tired."
Yes.
Meanwhile, in reality, your friend just saw your text, thought, "Okay, cool," and went back to eating their sandwich.
They literally do not care. We are fighting phantom prosecutors.
Completely phantom.
And it begs the question, you know what happens when you live in that courtroom for a decade. Because if your brain is constantly demanding an ironclad defense for every small choice, wouldn't that eventually start to, I don't know, corrupt the choices themselves?
That is the exact danger the source material points toward. If this compulsion goes unchecked, you slowly start making choices based entirely on what is easiest to defend.
Rather than what's actually best for you.
Exactly. You start optimizing your entire life for the phantom jury.
Let's play that out, because that is a terrifying thought. How does optimizing for the jury actually change the trajectory of someone's life?
Okay, let's look at a major life decision. You're choosing between career path A, which is, highly unconventional, deeply aligned with your passions, but very difficult to explain to a casual observer.
Right. It takes a whole conversation.
Exactly. Then you have career path B, which you feel entirely lukewarm about, but it has a recognizable title, a clear corporate ladder, and undeniable prestige.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. If your nervous system is trapped in the compulsion of constant justification, you will almost always default to path B.
Because Path B comes with a pre-written press release.
Exactly. Path B requires zero defense in the everyday courtroom. When you go to a dinner party and say, "I'm a senior vice president of logistics," the jury immediately nods.
Case closed. No further questions.
Case closed. But if you choose Path A, you have to spend the rest of your life explaining it. So to avoid the exhaustion of the explanation, you just abandon your intuition entirely. You live the most easily justifiable version of your life.
Wow. And the cost of that is a total disconnect from your own internal compass.
A profound disconnect.
Because intuition doesn't operate with, PowerPoint presentations, right? It doesn't have a spreadsheet of data to hand you.
No, it really doesn't.
Intuition is just a quiet pull. It says, this person isn't right for me, or, I just need to rest today. And if you demand a logical external defense for every single intuitive nudge, your intuition is eventually going to just stop speaking to you.
That's spot on. You've taught your nervous system that your internal knowing is completely worthless unless it holds up under cross-examination.
Which is so sad. And I guess that brings us to how this internal courtroom dynamic manifests in our actual day-to-day communication.
Yes, because when we don't trust our own internal knowing, we compensate by trying to over-engineer the other person's reaction.
Right.
And the source text gives us a core thesis here. If your choices are valid, they don't need a presentation to prove it.
Right. The presentation, oh man, we all know exactly what this looks like.
Oh, we've all sent one.
Absolutely. You wake up on a Saturday, you have these casual plans to grab coffee with an acquaintance. But you've had a brutal week, you are utterly drained, and your intuition gives you that quiet nudge, you need a slow morning.
The decision is completely valid.
Completely. You need to cancel. But instead of just communicating that fact, you draft the presentation text.
It's a masterpiece of anxiety.
It really is. It's 3 paragraphs long. It starts with a groveling apology, and then it moves into a bullet point list of your slight headache, the precise number of hours you slept.
A detailed account of your stressful Tuesday.
Yes. And somehow you weave in an anecdote about your dog's mild indigestion just to add an undeniable layer of crisis.
You really have to sell it.
Right. And then you hit send, and you just sit there and wait in pure agony for their validation.
And from a cognitive standpoint, receiving a text like that is incredibly overwhelming for the other person.
Really? How so?
Because you haven't just canceled a coffee. You've basically handed them a heavy emotional briefcase and asked them to audit it.
Oh, I love that analogy. an emotional briefcase. But okay, I have to push back on this, though.
Go for it.
Because I'm putting myself in the shoes of a listener who's thinking, wait, isn't explaining ourselves just like empathy? Isn't it just good communication?
That's a very common reaction.
Right, because if a friend invites me to a birthday dinner and it's expensive and I'm exhausted, if I just text back I can't make it, that reads as incredibly cold. Don't we owe the people in our lives some context so we don't just seem, sociopathic?
It's a fantastic pushback, and it highlights the exact trap most empathetic people fall into. We want to be kind, right?
Yeah.
We want to maintain the relationship.
Exactly. We care about them.
Right. But what's fascinating here is we have to look at the structural difference between sharing context and delivering a presentation.
Okay, lay that out for me.
They might look similar on the surface, but the underlying psychological engine driving them is completely different.
Break that down. What really is the difference between sharing context and delivering a presentation?
It is all about the emotional starting point. Context is shared freely from a place of security. It is a tool for building intimacy.
Intimacy.
Okay. You're basically saying, I have made a decision, and because I value you, I am choosing to bring you into my inner world so you can understand my reality.
Wow. Okay. That feels very grounding.
It is. A presentation, on the other hand, is delivered defensively from a place of anxiety. It is a tool for seeking permission.
Seeking permission. So it's not about them. It's about me needing them to say it's okay.
Exactly. You are saying, I want to make this decision. Please review this data and tell me I'm allowed to.
Oh, man. So it's all about whether you've actually authorized the decision yourself before you hit send.
Precisely. If your underlying belief is, my choice is valid, your delivery naturally becomes calm, brief, and grounded.
What does that sound like in practice?
You might say, hey, I'm so bummed I can't make the dinner. I'm completely burned out from the week and I really need to recharge, but let's celebrate just the two of us next week.
Okay, yeah. That is context. It's warm, but the decision is firm.
Exactly. But if your underlying belief is, I hope they don't hate me for this, that's when it morphs into the sprawling, anxious PowerPoint presentation.
It really is an energetic difference, isn't it? Sharing context feels like opening the front door of your house so someone can look inside and see what you're up to.
That's a great way to put it.
But delivering a presentation feels like sliding a dense legal document under the door, holding your breath, and just hoping they sign it and slide it back.
Yes, and you can literally feel the difference in your physical body after you communicate.
Oh, totally.
When you share context, you feel settled. The boundary is set. The relationship is honored. But when you send a presentation, your nervous system remains in a state of high alert.
You're just staring at those little typing bubbles.
Exactly. Your heart rate is elevated. You feel entirely unmoored until they respond. You have literally outsourced your emotional regulation to their text back.
Which is such a dangerous game to play. I want you, the listener, to do a mental audit right now of the last time you gave a presentation for a totally mundane adult choice.
It probably wasn't that long ago.
Probably not. Maybe it was explaining to your manager why you were taking the PTO you had already earned, or maybe it was explaining to your sibling why you bought a different brand of car than they recommended. Did that sprawling, desperate explanation actually make you feel more confident in your choice, or did it just highlight your own insecurity?
The irony of the presentation is that the more words you use to justify a choice, the more you signal to your own brain and to the other person that the choice is standing on shaky ground.
Wow. More words means less confidence.
Think of a building with a solid foundation. It doesn't need 50 temporary wooden struts propping it up from the outside.
Right, because it's solid.
Right. The sheer volume of those struts implies the building is fundamentally unstable. Your long, anxious explanations are those wooden struts.
Oh, that's such a good image.
They don't prove your validity. They advertise your lack of internal structural confidence.
And there's a serious physical consequence to holding up all those wooden struts, too. When you are constantly building these elaborate architectures of justification, you're draining your battery.
A massive drain.
Which brings us to the next vital concept from our sources. The deep physical exhaustion of over-explaining.
We really have to isolate where this fatigue is actually coming from, because it's highly deceptive.
How so?
Well, the exhaustion you feel at the end of the day does not come from the decisions themselves. Deciding to go to bed early is not tiring. Deciding to eat a sandwich instead of a salad is not tiring.
Right. The actions are functionally frictionless.
Exactly. The physical and emotional drain comes entirely from the PR campaign running in the background.
The PR campaign.
Think about the cognitive load involved in the everyday courtroom. First, you make the choice. Then the hypervigilant protocol kicks in.
Okay, what's step 1 of the protocol?
Step 1. You scan your environment to anticipate the other person's reaction. You run complex mental simulations of their potential disappointment, their anger, or even just their subtle judgment.
It's exhausting just hearing you describe it.
And that's just step 1. Step 2. You begin drafting counter-arguments to objections they haven't even made yet.
Oh, the shower arguments. We all do that.
Yes. And step 3. You painstakingly police your own vocabulary and tone, trying to thread the needle between apologetic and firm.
You're playing 3-dimensional chess just to decline a piece of cake at an office party.
Literally.
And running those simulations isn't just an abstract idea. The brain requires massive amounts of energy to model other people's emotional states.
It burns literal glucose.
Exactly. When your brain is frantically mapping out every possible way your coworker might react to you saying no to joining a committee, it's burning fuel. The presentation isn't just emotionally anxious, it is biologically exhausting.
It is an incredible misuse of our cognitive resources. We often talk about modern burnout as a product of our jobs or, the endless news cycle or the demands of family life.
Which are all valid factors.
They are. But I would argue that this constant internal translation process, translating our valid needs into palatable justifications for the outside world, is a massive, unacknowledged cause of burnout.
That is so profound, a hidden burnout.
You're carrying an invisible backpack full of drafted press releases and defensive postures. You wake up, you put the backpack on, and you carry it through every single interaction, no matter how minor.
And by 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
By 3 o'clock, you are completely depleted, and you haven't even done any heavy lifting in the physical world.
The heavy lifting was entirely mental. So what does this all mean? It means the act of over-explaining your rest is actually harder work than the thing you were explaining.
Yes.
You are working 10 times harder to justify taking a break than the energy you actually recover during the break. It completely negates the rest.
It's the ultimate paradox of the compulsion. Your brain uses this strategy to protect you from social friction. But in doing so, it subjects you to a constant grinding internal friction.
You avoid a momentary awkward silence, but the cost is a persistent state of chronic fatigue.
Exactly. You're trading a moment of discomfort for a lifetime of exhaustion.
And if we want to talk about where this internal friction reaches its absolute peak, where the stakes feel the highest, and where over-explaining does the most tangible damage to our lives, we have to talk about personal boundaries.
Yes, boundaries.
This brings us to perhaps the most actionable and profound concept from our source material: the game theory of why we treat our boundaries like negotiations.
This is the arena where the habit of over-explaining shifts from being an internal energy drain to being a major external vulnerability.
Right.
It's where we actively sabotage our own limits.
Before we get into the mechanics of that sabotage, let's elevate the terminology here for a second. We hear the word boundary constantly, almost to the point where it's kind of lost its meaning.
It has become a bit of a buzzword.
Right. So what is the functional, structural difference between a boundary and a negotiation?
In interpersonal game theory, a boundary is a unilateral statement of fact. It's a declarative limit regarding your own capacity or behavior.
Okay, unilateral.
Yes. It requires no agreement from the other party to exist. A negotiation, however, is a collaborative enterprise. It is a dynamic exchange designed to reach a mutual compromise.
So a statement of fact versus a collaborative compromise.
Correct. Now, the fatal flaw in the compulsion to justify is that it acts as a structural vulnerability. The moment you attach an explanation to a boundary, you instantly degrade it into a negotiation.
Oh, this is the trap. This is the exact trap. And I have a really painful real-life example of this.
Oh, let's hear it.
I did this just last week with a contractor working on my house. He wanted to do this massive, expensive upgrade to the plumbing that wasn't in the original plan. My boundary was simple. I am not paying for that upgrade, but my compulsion kicked in. I didn't want him to think I was cheap or difficult. So I entered the everyday courtroom.
Let me guess. You gave him a presentation.
A massive presentation. I told him I can't do the plumbing upgrade because I already allocated the extra budget to the electrical work, and I have property taxes coming due next month, and honestly, the timeline is just getting too tight before I have family coming to stay.
And what did the contractor do with all of that information?
He immediately dismantled every single point.
Of course he did.
He literally said, "Oh, don't worry about the budget. We can set up a payment plan that starts after your property taxes are paid." And the plumbing won't affect the timeline at all. My guys can do it in one day before your family arrives.
Oh.
I was completely trapped. I handed him the blueprint to my own fortress, and he just walked right in.
That is the perfect illustration of why the word because is the enemy of a boundary.
The word because is the enemy. Wow.
You thought you were setting up boundary, but structurally, you were presenting an obstacle course. By over-explaining, you signaled to the contractor that your limit wasn't actually a firm wall. It was just a series of logistical problems.
And what do humans do when presented with logistical problems?
They problem solve.
They try to fix it. I basically invited him to collaborate on finding a way to get me to spend more money.
Exactly. You invited him to the negotiation table. The moment you provide the because, you are implicitly asking the other person to evaluate your reasons.
Right.
If they can solve your because, your boundary collapses. You are left with two terrible options. You either have to capitulate and agree to the thing you didn't want to do, or
You have to invent a brand new because, which makes you look completely dishonest and evasive.
yes, you look like you're just making excuses.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because when we feel our boundaries are being steamrolled, like I felt with that contractor, our instinct is to blame the other person. We vent to our friends. Can you believe how pushy this guy is? He totally ignored my boundaries. But the source material forces a really uncomfortable level of accountability on us here. It really does hold up a mirror. Are people maliciously ignoring our boundaries? Or did our constant, anxious justification accidentally invite them to dismantle them?
It is a bitter pill to swallow, but highly liberating once you do.
Yeah.
Most people are not malicious boundary violators.
Right, they aren't out to get us.
No, they are just practical problem solvers. When you offer them a list of excuses, they genuinely believe they're helping you by removing the obstacles.
They think they're being helpful.
They don't realize that your elaborate list of reasons was actually just a smokescreen for a simple, unadorned no.
It's like building a heavy iron gate to protect your property, but leaving it wide open with a sign that says, "Please review the hinges on this gate and tell me if they look okay."
That is exactly what it is.
And then getting furious when people walk into your yard. We are using over-explaining as a shield, hoping it protects us from the friction of someone being disappointed in our no.
But the shield is riddled with holes.
Every justification is a handhold for someone else to grab onto and pull you into a debate.
So the question becomes, how do we dismantle the everyday courtroom? How do we stop turning our iron gates into open negotiations?
Yes, practically speaking, if this threat detection system in our brain is so deeply wired to avoid social friction, how do we actually override it?
It requires a paradigm shift in what kind of discomfort you are willing to tolerate.
Okay.
You have to recognize the physical sensation of anxiety that spikes when you don't explain yourself, that racing heart, that urge to type 3 more paragraphs, and you have to actively choose not to relieve it.
That sounds incredibly hard.
You have to build an internal tolerance for being misunderstood.
The tolerance for being misunderstood. Wow. That's difficult, but it sounds like the only way out.
It is the only way out. You have to accept a hard truth. If you set a clear, simple boundary without a sprawling presentation, the other person might not like it.
They might be mad.
They might be disappointed. They might even construct an uncharitable narrative about you in their own mind.
Oh, they're so selfish.
Exactly. But you have to weigh that temporary external friction against the chronic, exhausting internal friction of living on trial.
Right.
You have to decide that your cognitive bandwidth and your peace of mind are vastly more valuable than managing someone else's perception of you.
It's a complete shift in your locus of control. You are pulling the power away from their potential reaction and anchoring it back into your own autonomy.
And as you practice this, something fascinating happens to your nervous system.
What happens?
The first time you offer an unadorned no, your amygdala will scream at you. But when you survive that interaction, when you aren't cast out of the tribe, when the world doesn't end, your brain learns a new pathway.
It recalibrates.
Yes, it learns that a decision is valid simply because you made it.
Let's synthesize everything we've unpacked today because we have covered some incredibly dense psychological ground here.
We really have.
We started by looking at this involuntary compulsion to justify how our ancient brain chemistry misfires, treating minor social choices like matters of survival, and forcing us into the everyday courtroom.
And we examined the severe cost of that compulsion. How optimizing our lives for what is easily defensible ultimately disconnects us from our own intuition, leading us down paths that look good on paper but feel hollow in reality.
We looked at the critical distinction between sharing context to build intimacy and delivering a presentation to beg for permission. And we uncovered the biological exhaustion of those presentations, how running endless social simulations and carrying that invisible backpack of defensive PR burns our daily energy before we even step out the door.
And finally, we confronted the structural vulnerability of the word because. We saw how over-explaining a boundary instantly degrades it into a collaborative negotiation, practically inviting people to problem-solve our limits away.
It's a lot to process, but recognizing this machinery is the first step to turning it off. It's like finding the hidden app on your phone that's been draining your battery by 20% every single day.
That's a great analogy. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final framing to consider.
Okay, let's hear it.
True confidence in a decision does not make a sound. It doesn't need a fanfare, it doesn't need a sprawling text message, and it doesn't need a PowerPoint presentation. You do not need to convince the world to validate a choice. You only need to make it. Your autonomy is not up for debate unless you put it on the table.
I love that so much. Your autonomy is not up for debate unless you put it on the table. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a specific challenge to test this out in your own life this week.
Highly recommend trying this.
Think about an upcoming scenario where you need to set a minor boundary or make a choice that might slightly disappoint someone. Maybe it's declining an invitation, pushing back a deadline, or telling a contractor you aren't paying for the upgrade. What would happen if, just this once, you refused to enter the everyday courtroom? What would happen if you made the choice, stated it clearly and kindly, and then just let it sit there?
No bullet points.
No bullet points, no health updates, no logistical obstacle courses, just a simple, valid choice followed by total, comfortable silence. I challenge you to tolerate the discomfort of that silence and see just how much power you get back when you finally step down from the witness stand.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.